What up, everybody? This is the Dr. Football Ultimate Patriots podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dennis Tian. I am recording tonight from my real live medical office in Dedham, Massachusetts. Joining me, as always, is the CEO of HedgeBetter, Justin Fine from the HedgeBetter studio in Braintree. Justin, my man, how you doing on this wretched, dreary, cold, rainy Tuesday night?
Yeah, it's a really, really blonde night. You know, I'm hanging in there. I can't complain. Nothing crazy going on. Coming off a Patriots bye week. Yeah, I don't know. What's up with you?
How are you what are you gonna watch on TV tonight? There's no football on, right? I'm not really excited about anything on TV. What are you gonna do when you get home tonight?
You know what? I'll tell you what. I know I'm late to the party, but I am in the middle of Breaking Bad. I just started the final season of it. So you know what? Okay. I'll probably have to hop back into that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's good. I never watched that show. You know that?
You know what? I gotta say, and I'm sure you know by now most people have seen it. I gotta say it's a good show. I don't understand the discussion of one of the best shows of all time. I don't understand it.
Fair. Yeah. I mean, I think I watched the first episode years ago and it just never really captivated me. And I gotta be honest, I'm going to sound like a huge nerd, but I am a doctor and a public health geek. So I'm just going to say this, I am not into the glorification of the drug culture. I think it's a terrible thing. There's too many lives and families that have been affected. I don't think there's anything cool about it. And I'm not into having these hero-like fantasies about people dealing drugs. It just doesn't appeal to me. Doesn't ring to me.
Yeah, for sure. And I gotta say, is very over the top, very dramatic. I've heard people say, oh, they think it's better than The Sopranos. And I gotta say, man, The Sopranos had that element where it's it was kind of believable. You know what I mean? It was kind of you felt like you were immersed in the middle of these people's lives. Breaking Bad, you totally got to kind of suspend your disbelief for a little bit and just roll with the punches. So it's a little over the top for me, but it's keeping me entertained. I at least got to finish it, see how it wraps up.
I'm also, Justin, not into the whole zombie thing. No. And I never watched The Walking Dead either. Again, there's plenty of life forms currently on this planet right now that are more than close enough to zombies. Go take a walk through a nursing home if you want. And that's the real deal. So I don't feel like I need to watch that on television. I don't feel like I need to aggrandize that or make it anything. There's plenty going on in this real world on this planet, right? And plenty of sick people that need help, and it's not funny and it's not a joke. So I just can't get into that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I never got into that either, for being honest. So yeah.
Not my jam. All right. Well, that's great. Let's get into what we do get into on this podcast, and that is the New England Patriots coming off a bye week. I shared a funny meme on Facebook this weekend. Mark safe from the New England Patriots losing on Sunday, but it did feel good to have a respite from the Pats and all the ups and downs, and mostly downs of this year. I will say this, and we will get into this when we get to around the league. I thought this was going to be the worst Sunday for NFL football that I could remember in a long time, in terms of, if you looked at these games, there weren't many great games.
Right.
It actually turned out to be a pretty good Sunday because a lot of them ended up being close and the good games did deliver.
Yeah. I got to say, there were a couple of surprises, a couple of games I wasn't expecting, right? I don't think anybody expected Carolina to give the Eagles the fight that they did. There were, a couple of good games. I mean, the Rams, Bills, I gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised with the product we saw this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of close games, very competitive. Let's get to it, Justin. We got a great roster of topics this evening about the Patriots. I thought we could kind of step back and, usually the bye week is closer to midseason, but we're at the end here. But I thought we kind of step back and take a big picture look on a few things. So we're going to get into where the coaching staff stands. I thought we could review some of the offseason transactions that this team has made and kind of go through which ones we thought were hits and misses. And let's face it, there was a lot more misses than hits.
Yeah.
I thought we could get a little bit into what we're looking for in these final 4 games. But before we get to any of that, we have to begin with the Bill Belichick to UNC story. And I know that you're dying to talk about this. So usually I do the kickoff, but I want you to do the kickoff for Belichick to UNC tonight, Justin, because this is a big story and a surprise.
It's a really big story. I mean, it just in one way, it's so Belichick because like when everybody thinks he's gonna zig, he zags, right? But also in another way, I just can't wrap my mind around it quite yet. It's going to take some time to settle in. I mean, look, I think this is a guy who obviously, was still looking to coach. I think it's kind of a little crazy. I can't say I can't say I disagree with it, but I think it's crazy that, he weighed out all of his options and figured that, there really wasn't going to be a suitor in the NFL that kind of fit his needs and in his wants, and to return. I mean, I think it's just so interesting. And not only that, I think the fact that him going to college within itself is its own animal, but the fact that he chose North Carolina, I just think it's such a random place to go to. I mean, look, I get it. They're in the ACC. He's got an opportunity to kind of to build a legacy for him there. It's a little less competitive than hopping into like the SEC, or like the Big Ten, whatever it is. But I'm just shocked. The whole thing shocks me. I think that probably signifies that he's done with the NFL, right? He's no longer.
He's 100% done.
He's done with the NFL. He's not, he's not chasing after some of those records that I think we all thought he'd come back and catch. I think, and I think there was a couple of good landing spots that could have been opening up in the NFL. And I'm actually just really shocked that he didn't wait another month or two and try to see what his options could have been to return to the league. It sounds to me like he made a conscious decision to go to college football and that the NFL just wasn't in his cards.
We've said it, Justin. I've said it from day one, which is Bill Belichick's market and Bill Belichick's desirability to NFL franchises is not what some people said that it was.
Yeah.
And that is based on a couple different factors. Look at his age, right? He's 73. That's a factor.
Yeah.
His drafts. Look at how he's drafted the last 5 years. You're going to give that guy the keys to your franchise if you're an NFL owner, and the drafting has been horrible, abysmal in New England. Look at what he did to Mac Jones. Look at the Matt Patricia, Josh McDaniels thing. Look at the way this team played on the field. Let's not forget it. They were sloppy, mistake-prone, undisciplined. This was not the Bill Belichick that we knew for 20 years, the last 3 or 4 seasons. Look at his press conferences. Okay, that's who you want to be the face of your franchise, connecting with your players in 2024 in the NFL. Add it all up, and he is no longer the commodity I think that some people think he is. That said, I am still a little surprised that some owner, desperate owner, didn't make a bad choice and bring him in. But the reality is, if you really whittle it down, the market for Belichick was a lot smaller than we thought it was. And it doesn't look like it was in the cards. And I agree with one thing you said, which is why not wait a month or two? And I think there's 2 reasons for that. One is because he doesn't think it's going to change anything. And 2 is maybe he just really wants to get back to coaching football.
Yeah, maybe he does. The other thing that I didn't mention at the beginning that I have to say is part of the reason why I'm a little confused now is because I think about how college sports in general, but in particular college football has changed over the last couple of years now, right? I mean, does Bill Belichick, a couple of things that just strike me as so odd and out of sorts that Bill Belichick is now going to have to put up with in today's college game, right?
Right.
So let's start with just the recruiting aspect of it. I mean, and this is something that obviously has always been a part of college football, but can you see Bill Belichick traveling across the country, kissing the behinds of parents and 18-year-old kids? To me, I can't see that happening whatsoever. The other thing is you talk about now the different, not only the NIL deals, the money that's coming to college football, right? Can you see him sitting down with 18, 19-year-olds who are trying to negotiate top dollar deals for themselves and try to squeeze the most money? I mean, you talk about the transfer portal now, the ability, it's a lot easier than it used to be for kids to move around programs and shift things around. Like, can you imagine him, trying trying to convince a 19-year-old kid to come in and join him, or trying to convince a 20-year-old kid that he should stay. Like Belichick, it just does not seem like the type of move that or even just the situation that Belichick would be interested in. I think college football is just a whole new animal now, and it doesn't strike me as a fit for who Bill Belichick is as a coach.
So you're saying that you think that college, just in general, college athletics is just a bad fit?
Yeah, I think college football has gotten a recent injection of all the things that Bill Belichick disliked, I think, doing at the NFL.
That's perfectly said.
Yep. And when I think about that, I think about the fact that Bill Belichick hated to do that. I mean, he had to grind his teeth and barely scrape by doing that with superstars, the best players in the world, full-grown adults, guys in their 20s, 30s. How is he going to do that with unproven, kind of dime a dozen guys, that are 18, 19 years old? It's just a whole different animal. I just don't understand his desire to do it.
It's certainly changed a lot in the last few years. And like you said, it's trended away from what Belichick historically kind of stood for,
right?
Which is what makes it interesting that he's doing this.
Yes.
On one sense, Justin, I have to be honest, I do love this in the sense that I love that Belichick just wants to coach the game. And I do feel like one of the things that's driving this from Belichick is the fact that he just loves the sport and football. And in some sense, maybe he's rejecting the absurdity of the NFL and what the NFL has become, which is clearly changed massively in the last 5 to 10 years, and going to a college game to work with young men and to just really coach the game in a more pure way. And maybe that's naive of me, given the changes you just illustrated, but I do kind of love and think that this is really just about Belichick wanting to coach ball.
It's definitely about Belichick wanting to coach ball. And if this was 5 years ago, I would agree with you. I would say, hey, the guy just wants to get back to the purity of the game, coaching players who do it for the love of the game, right? Guys who haven't been corrupted by the money and the fame and all the, the nonsense, the egos, the personalities, all the nonsense you have to deal with at the NFL level. But it's like that has all infused itself into the modern era college game, right? And I think it's only going to continue to get worse. I mean, there's still a lot that's up in the air. I know there's a big lawsuit right now with the NIL, like they're trying to expand, I think, payment options for players. Like it's moved away from, I think, the purity of the sport. And that would have been the only reason why I ever anticipated Belichick going back to college.
Yeah. And to your point, it's like you think of the great college recruiters of our time, both like football and basketball. And
yes,
you're thinking of guys like Pitino and Calipari and Pete Carroll. And how about Dabo Sweeney had his run, and some of these other like younger, energetic guys. And it is really hard to picture Belichick in that role of like sitting down with the parents, who, by the way, he's like old enough to be their parents because he's like 30 years older than probably most of them, or 25, 30 years older than most of them, and trying to sell them on UNC. It sounds crazy.
It does sound crazy. I mean, could you picture, some 18-year-old sitting there with his parents, and the parents turn around and Bill and say, "Well, Bill, what can you do for me? What can you do for us?" Right? Like that. But
can I play devil's advocate a little on what you said too? Because don't you think that Belichick's experience in managing money on a salary cap level might actually have some relevance to the college game now, even though it's like, okay, it makes it less pure, but Belichick, what's his strength? Like managing the cap was for a long time a strength of his, like playing hardball. Don't you feel like now a college football program might have to be successful and understand that? And I'm guessing a lot of these schools, because this is new, have no idea how to do this. And Belichick is going to be someone that really knows how to manage money.
And I think that's a great point. I do think Belichick will have a level of experience of dealing with these teams' finances and kind of overseeing salaries and payment to players and structuring all these deals that a lot of these coaches don't have yet. But I also I just see that as like potentially causing issues as well. You hear all these stories about players, just leaving programs, trying to chase the biggest contract, right? I mean, it's all about who can pump the most money. I mean, Dave Portnoy's been all over the internet talking about the money that he put up to bring the Michigan quarterback in. And it's like, you hear all these stories and it's like, does Belichick strike you as the type of guy who's going to just absolutely, empty the clip for some 18-year-old like coming out of high school? Or is he going to be the one who's trying to take a practical approach going, look, if I give this guy this money, I mean, I don't have the money to spread throughout the rest of the roster, right? But nowadays it's all about landing that number one quarterback prospect, that number one like prospect at their position, right? And those guys want big money. They want top dollar. So right. I think he's just going to be at odds, like his philosophy and even the expertise he has, how he typically does things. I think it's going to be at odds with how the game is trending.
And wasn't that really his undoing one of his undoings in New England? Yes. Was his unwillingness to shift towards like that investment in like skill position and explosive players on both sides of the ball, especially on offense, quarterback, receivers. And right, you look at the college game now, and that is such a huge part of the college game. Is Belichick going to be able to keep up with that shift? Is he going to be the same stingy, controller of the purse strings in North Carolina that he was in New England? And is that going to work at the college level? Exactly. Justin, what do you think about the actual pick of UNC? Like of all the places he could go, I kind of love it because I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why. And it's not just my wife is an alum and I kind of root for them. But how about this? It's in a good conference. It's not an SEC school, right. But let's not forget 2 ACC teams made the playoffs this year. So UNC has historically been a mediocre football program. There is a path for them to become a bigger program. Florida State has been a consistently good program. Clemson recently out of the ACC was a terrific program that was right up there with everyone for a few years. Yeah, I think the pathway is there for a school like UNC to get there. It's a terrific place to live, terrific campus, good conference. I think we'll have a lot of appeal to young players because of that. I kind of like the pick in that sense. What are your thoughts?
I think you make a compelling argument for why it's a good fit and why it'll be good for the sport and for the college landscape. I mean, I guess I'm still surprised that if he was going to go down to the college level, that he wouldn't take over a top tier program. And I know for the reasons you just illustrated, right, there are benefits with not going to a top dog in the SEC. And maybe that's what he was looking for.
Or maybe they don't want him. Like you got to look at this from UNC's perspective too. Like if you're a middling Division I program, this is the kind of radical move, right, that you have to make to take that step up. And if I'm UNC, I'm looking right at what just happened in Colorado the last couple years, right? And bringing in Deion Sanders and what that did for that program. And if I'm UNC, I'm thinking that. I'm saying I'm bringing in Bill Belichick. That's my ticket to instant credibility nationally.
Yeah, I agree. I think that could do a lot for them recruiting wise. I think it gives them a big leg up. And also, if you think about it, like if you're just talking about room for improvement, right? Like there's way more room to improve North Carolina's standing in the college football world than there is to improve like a USC or a Texas or a Georgia, right? And I know those jobs weren't necessarily open, but just saying like, okay, he has a lot more room to grow and the expectations are a little bit lower, I think, where he's going. And one thing that this is totally on an unrelated note, and I don't think it has any relation to his decision or anything like that, not saying that, but the irony isn't lost on me that the Patriots brought in, who could hopefully be the future of their franchise, a North Carolina guy, and they're sending their past, right? The past of their franchise down to North Carolina. I think that's just an interesting little tidbit, totally unrelated, but I just think it's interesting.
Coincidence. Yeah. It's kind of like oddly coincidental. Right. But the point it does make is there have been some terrific players that have gone through that UNC program. So it's not like he's going to like a backwater place. Like this is a place that a football program that I think he could potentially really develop to being a top program if things go well for him.
I agree. And, I'm curious because we haven't really touched on this yet, right? And you wonder about how burnt that bridge is between Belichick and maybe the Patriots organization, and what communication or if influence, if any, there still is there. Any sort of line, like any sort of line of communication between the two entities. But you wonder, like, would Belichick being in college and having a better pulse on the college game, the players coming out of college, like the current landscape, like, wouldn't the best case possible be like for him to still have a good relationship with the Patriots? Because couldn't he kind of help create what was in place for so long between like Nick Saban and him, that like dynamic where like he had his inside guy, you can't tell me he wasn't getting, he didn't have his ear to Nick Saban and just kind of, taking it all in, soaking it all in. Like, couldn't you see in a world where like it could be good for the Patriots to have somebody like Belichick at the college level, kind of helping them maybe when it comes to like drafting and picking up undiscovered talent out of college, stuff like that?
It could be, but that bridge is totally burned. That's just like never going to happen.
Right.
And the irony of what you're saying too is like whenever Belichick got that kind of back pipeline on guys, especially the last couple of years, a lot of those guys ended up not being very good anyways,
true.
right?
Yeah, very
including
true.
Mac Jones, let's not forget, and Nick Saban, a Nick Saban player. I want to get back a little bit to the NFL, Justin, and look at this from the other side. When we talk about the Belichick market being so small, who are the teams that should be in on Belichick? And let's just say this to start. There are 3 teams in this league that do not have coaches. And Bill Belichick is completely a free agent right now. And there is nothing holding back any one of those 3 teams from going to Bill Belichick and hiring him tomorrow to be their head coach. And yet none of those 3 teams are interested in him. I think that right there is like a canary in the coal mine, if you will, about Belichick's market value. But I'm talking about the Jets, Bears, and the Saints. None of them interested in Belichick. The Browns, he's not going there, right? The Jaguars, we've talked about. Mm-hmm. The Raiders, I think, are a nightmare. Philly, Sirianni is not going anywhere. Dallas is a salary cap nightmare. $100 million tied up on a receiver and a quarterback. There's no way he's going to take that job. I see 3 teams that I'm surprised aren't more interested in Belichick. The Giants, the Bills, and the Bengals. Mm-hmm. Who do you think, Justin, should be in on Belichick?
Well, I think with that last one, you hit the nail on the head. And, I think I mentioned this either last week.
You said the Bengals a few weeks
ago. I love the Bengals. I love the Bengals as a landing spot for him. I thought it would have been a perfect fit. Me, I'm a big Joe Burrow guy. Love Joe Burrow. I think he would have been great not only to come in kind of add that defensive element to that team that team so desperately needs. But I think he also would have been a good fit because that team is going to find themselves in a little bit of a salary cap bind. And I think having, Joe Burrow got this big contract. They got a bunch of guys they need to pay. Jamar Chase hasn't been paid yet. A bunch of guys they'd like to be able to keep. I think Belichick would have been the perfect guy to come into that situation and take control of that organization and help them, right the ship. Obviously, that ship has sailed. But I agree. I think the Bengals would have been a great choice for him. I understand, why someone like Chicago is not in on him, right? Because Chicago is looking for like a Ben Johnson, like a type, like a McVay type, like a young, I think good, brilliant offensive mind to come in and pair with Caleb Williams. So I understand why they weren't interested. Dallas, I wouldn't be interested if I was him. I wouldn't want to coach under Jerry Jones. But yeah, I think I think you're right. I think the Giants, the Bengals, and who was the third one? Did you say? You say Buffalo? Buffalo. Yeah. I think those would have been three good spots for him. But again, I think
Can I give you the problem I see with each of those 3?
Yeah.
Because I tried to think of it. I'm like, why aren't those 3 teams interested in Belichick? The Bengals are a historically cheap franchise.
Yeah.
There's no way they're paying Bill Belichick's salary, 20 or 25 million. Like Belichick's not going to go somewhere to work for peanuts.
Right.
Even if his performance hasn't been quite what we expect from him the last few years. They're not paying Bill Belichick $20 million a year. No freaking chance. This is the franchise that kept Marvin Lewis for a decade without winning a playoff game.
Yeah.
So that's that. So that's the problem with the Bengals. The Bills are still winning with Sean McDermott.
Right.
And I don't think he's going to get fired this year. So I think that's the problem. Like the Bills are still very much alive. The Giants, to me, make the most sense of all, to be honest with you. Of all the teams that I just named, they make the most sense. But maybe they're not interested. They've just had 10 terrible years. Do they want to give the keys to this thing to a 73-year-old guy after what they just went through and watch him go draft a defensive tackle with the number 2 pick this year? I don't think so.
I agree. And honestly, if I was him, I don't think I'd be that interested in it either. I think it's the biggest rebuild. It's the most work. You got your biggest question mark. I mean, look, with the Bengals and the Bills, at least you know you have a franchise quarterback to work around, right? I mean,
right.
With the Giants, you really have nothing. Like you have scraps on that roster to kind of work with and rebuild around, and you still got to hit in the quarterback, which is arguably the most important part. And you got to deal with a culture of losing that's kind of overtaken that Giants organization. I mean, they got their issues, and I think I just think it would have been the biggest reclamation project for Belichick out of the 3.
It would have, but it would have also afforded him the opportunity to implement his own program. So yeah, I think for him in his ego and the way that he is, like, I think that would almost be something that would be appealing to Belichick. So I'm thinking that the Giants probably aren't interested in him because you know what I mean? Because if the Giants were interested in Belichick, I think Belichick would be interested in the blank slate that he could shape the way he wants.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not convinced the Giants are ready to move on from Dable yet. Although whether they should be, that's a different question. I kind of weirdly think they're going to bring Dable back for another year and give him a chance to start from scratch without Daniel Jones.
Right.
But again, it's a big project. And look, at the end of the day, maybe they said, hey, we're not looking for a guy to come in here. Again, he's 73, right? Maybe they said, look, it's him to come in here and rebuild this entire program. That's a tall undertaking at this point. And maybe they just weren't ready to do that.
Yeah, if you're the Mariners, you're looking at his last 5 drafts in New England and you're like, wait a second. We've just had a 10-year run of futility and we got the chance to rebuild. And we want to give the keys to this guy that just drafted Cole Strange and Tyquan Thornton.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, absolutely not. No way. That is. I get the trepidation. One other one, Justin. What about the Bears? I mean, the Bears obviously going to be in the market for a coach this year. We just had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about how Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars were a terrible fit for Bill Belichick because Lawrence and Belichick, everything Belichick stands for in terms of being like this iconoclast of these diva quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence goes in opposition to that. Yeah. Couldn't you say pretty much the exact same thing for Caleb Williams and the Bears?
Oh, I totally agree. And I mean, look, if you're the Bears, you're looking at what Bill Belichick just did with Mac Jones, right? And you got a guy in Caleb Williams who, they're struggling a little bit in year one. They had a defensive head coach. It didn't pan out. He lost the locker room. They essentially had a kind of dumpster fire of a rookie year for Caleb Williams. And I can see them saying, hey, we're not looking to bring in somebody like that who's defensive minded, not super forward thinking when it comes to, maybe his coaching and his approach. And look what he just did with his last quarterback that he brought in. So I could see them saying, look, we need somebody younger, somebody a little bit more with the times, somebody a little bit more offensive minded. And honestly, I just think it would have been a bad fit.
I agreed. I would have been a bad fit. So that's what I'm saying, Justin, because we're going to move on in a second. But the take home from this conversation is if you really look critically at the market for Bill Belichick, and you consider his demands, right? He gave a 400-page plan to UNC of like what he wanted and what he's going to do. So you consider the demands, the cronies, the McDaniels and the Matt Patricias and the Mike Lombardis, his age, his performance the last 5. You add all that up and it doesn't, then all of a sudden you realize the market for him was razor thin from day one to begin with. And no one should be surprised that this might be his best option.
Yeah. And maybe it is. And at the end of the day, obviously, it's a done deal now. He's going to UNC.
Is it a done deal?
Is it not a done deal?
I don't know. It's been reported, but it hasn't been confirmed yet. So I think we should hold off on saying
okay.
Done deal yet.
All right.
Somebody reported it, but it's not official.
Interesting. Okay. Well, yeah. Then I guess we gotta hold off and wait for it to become official. But you know what? I'm gonna be very, very interested in seeing how it plays out. For all the reasons that we kind of just mentioned.
Just to clarify that, according to NBC Sports Pro Football Talk, Bill Belichick has an offer to coach UNC.
Yeah.
It does not mean it's official yet. There has been an offer made to do it. That could change any minute. We're recording Tuesday at 6:00. It could be by 7 or 8 tonight. It's official, but it's not official now.
Got it. Okay. All right. So that's interesting that he has been offered the job, but he is not officially said anything about.
Right. But what are the terms? Right. Is it an offer or is it an offer? Did you agree to the 400-page manifesto?
Right.
Or did you cut 100 pages out, and what's he going to be willing to live with?
Exactly. And Belichick's probably at the point right now. I mean, you look what he's accomplished in his career, talk about the money he's probably got. I mean, I know the guy wants to coach and he wants to get back into the game, but he's probably sitting there going, hey, as a prerequisite for even talking, here's my 400-page, manifesto. That's the first thing. You sign off on everything in there before we even talk, right? I feel like he's at the point where he doesn't even want to negotiate any of that stuff. It's, hey, here's my playbook. Here's what I'm going to do. If you're okay with it, let's talk about potentially joining forces.
Exactly. And don't forget, we didn't even mention the whole Steve Belichick side of this thing and him being the succession plan. I mean, that gets really complicated.
It does.
Just because there was an offer on the table doesn't mean that it's going to officially happen yet. Yep. I think it sounds like there's real smoke to this. It sounds like there's real smoke to this, but I could still see it going either way. Last question for you, Justin. How does this all affect Belichick's legacy if he does end up at UNC? Personally, I don't hold it against his legacy at all. I think I've said many times on this podcast, he has absolutely nothing to prove. He doesn't need to win another pro game. I mean, there are a couple things. Yes, if you could go win a Super Bowl in another market, that would really cement his legacy. But you and I both know that's so unlikely to happen. The best, safest move for his legacy would be to never coach another pro game. In my opinion, his legacy is safe. He doesn't need to prove anything else. And I'm totally not judging him at all if he does go and do this.
Yeah, I would agree. I think like you said, his record in what he's accomplished, I think, is well understood and well respected by true football fans. And look, I think this is almost more of just like a new challenge for him, right? I think it gives us all the ability to kind of, I don't want to say appreciate Belichick, but I guess maybe just consume Belichick. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but just taking Belichick in a whole new light where it's like, hey, we're not evaluating him as an NFL coach or, compared to what he did with Tom Brady and the Patriots or anything like that. This is just a fresh new start, a whole different, playing field. And I think it's just going to be interesting.
Are you going to be rooting for UNC if he takes the job next year?
Yeah. I mean, I guess compared to the average team, right? Yeah. Why not?
They're going to be my college team next year.
Yeah.
If Belichick ends up there. They already kind of were a little bit, but I'll be actively rooting for them.
Yeah. Double whammy for you, UNC and Belichick. So
there you go. Exactly. All right. I want to shift gears a little, Justin, and kind of bridge the next topic with the last one. I want to talk a little bit about the Patriots and where this franchise stands right now. But I want to use this as a bridge to get us from point A to point B, which is that when you see what's happening with Belichick now and his lack of market value, does it make you re-examine the current situation the Patriots are in and maybe put the performance of Mayo and Wolf in a little bit of context? And does it really, I think, speak to how bad a shape this franchise was in? And maybe we were being unreasonable with some of the expectations we have. Now, I'm going to say right off the bat that I don't agree with that. I think things are getting worse. I think they're going in the wrong direction. But should we have a little more context to what Mayo and Wolf have done, given how bad things were left by Bill Belichick?
I, I'm gonna say no, just because look, we've seen some organizations in crappy situations that are able to turn it around in a season or two, right? And even if it's not a full turnaround, you're able to see a marked improvement, right? And I think Belichick in the last couple of years here, there's a lot of gripes, there's a lot of reasons to maybe have some of the complaints that people have, but you know what? Like I think if Mayo and this coaching staff were anything to write home about, I think we would have seen at least somewhat of an improvement in the things we talked about. And right now, I think the only real improvement we've seen in this organization is Drake May. I think everything else looks stagnant, if not worse.
Agree 1,000% with that. Everything else looks stagnant, if not worse. Like you just. I know a lot of people are going to use this as an excuse to justify where this franchise is right now.
Yep.
I can't get over the fact that that they're heading in the wrong direction, and that's my firm belief about this organization. They're heading in the wrong direction, and when you look at where they are, every single indicator on this franchise right now, besides the quarterback, which is a huge one, granted, is going in the wrong direction. Every other box that they had the opportunity to check this offseason, they failed to check that. So I am giving no passes for Mayo and Wolf because of the circumstance here.
Yeah, no, I'm not giving them any passes either. They didn't inherit the greatest situation, but I also haven't seen anything they've done to turn it around, if we're being completely honest.
They've done nothing. In fact, they've done the opposite. We're moving further away. The franchise is moving further away.
Yes.
And they're going the wrong way as this season develops because of a lot of their decisions. So what I will say, Justin, is this, and I don't know if you heard, there were a few reports today, interesting reports that came out. One was by Greg Bedard of the Boston Sports Journal. Basically, in summary, said that Robert Kraft will not hesitate to do what he needs to do if Jerod Mayo over these last 4 games shows that he is not the man for the job, that Mayo's job is not safe yet for next year. And that was an informed report from Bedard. Mike Giardi on the Boston Sports Journal as well also had a report that said that he got some pushback from league sources for reporting that Jonathan Kraft is on board with Mayo as the coach for next year, as is his father. Quote, while Robert may have initially been the one making calls around the league, I'm told that Jonathan has been the driving force since then. There's been some different reporting on the purpose of those calls. The initial conversation centered on how to support the quarterback. Still, that tidbit sprouted in several different directions regarding coordinators, the general manager, Elliot Wolf, and depending on how this season plays out, Mayo himself. So those are 2 plugged-in, connected guys.
Yeah.
Greg Bedard, Mike Giardi, that are reporting today that Mayo's job is not guaranteed for next year. What I'm here to tell you today, Justin, is Jerod Mayo is coaching for his job in these last 4 games, in my opinion.
I mean, look, I hope that type of pressure and that type of scrutiny is being applied here. I mean, the same part of me that wants to give Jerod Mayo a chance to have a full season of Drake May, to kind of have to maybe spend some of this money. You saw that they've got the most, I think, room in their salary cap heading into the 2025 season. So part of me wants to give him a chance to kind of establish his presence, go into year 2, build off of Drake May, see how we can spend that money. But then the other part of me is look, we've wasted enough time. We're deep enough into this rebuild. If he's not the guy, you need to rip the Band-Aid off and you need to find the right guy. I tend to lean towards, look, if he's not the right guy, get him out of here. You can still give him the benefit of the doubt in maybe some of those situations and say you didn't have a ton of time. But you know what? Look, I'd way rather bring in the right guy if the right guy is available in the market. And I think too, that's a big factor. I think the availability of his replacement is also a big factor. I wouldn't want to send Jerod Mayo out for, somebody else who we just absolutely have no clue about, somebody who's unproven, somebody who, is really a wild card. If we had the right person in mind, a la Vrabel, someone like that, yeah, I'd make that switch.
I would say, Justin, that if you look at it, it is really not about the record.
Right.
The three, that's expected. Okay. All the indicators are getting worse. The penalties getting worse. The discipline in the game is getting worse. The decision making in the game is getting worse. Clock management is getting worse. The defense, supposed to be his strength, is getting worse. They're the worst defense in the NFL with the easiest schedule in the NFL.
Yep.
It's unheard of. Jerod Mayo, after 13 games, is getting worse. This is what I would tell the Crafts to look at. What over the last 13 games makes you think that Jerod Mayo has earned another bite at the apple? What is going to change over the next 12 or 13 games? How likely is it to change? And the overwhelming likelihood is that it isn't going to change that much. And you're going to be sitting here next October, a couple games below 500, maybe a little better. And you're going to be realizing at that point you need to change coaches. And at that point, you'll have wasted 2 years of Drake May's rookie contract, futzing around with Jerod Mayo. All the indicators are going the wrong way. I don't think Jerod Mayo has earned a second season.
No, and it'd be super unfortunate, especially when you feel like, you may have ushered Belichick out, and, you may have passed up on some other guys that were available to fill the opportunity, and the way you kind of presented him as the heir apparent, and there's all this, external reasons why he's the guy for the job. I mean, you dug yourself into a little bit of a hole, but the worst thing you can do at this point is keep digging. So, I think Mayo has an opportunity to, especially with a couple of tough divisional games coming up against pair games against Buffalo. He's got a chance to prove something. This team has a chance to prove something. And you know what? If he doesn't and they move on, I'm not gonna shed any tears over it.
Yeah, why would you? I mean, at this point, I think the main argument that people make to keep him is some misplaced sense of justice or obligation to the fact that he was treated unfairly, and not given really a fair opportunity. That's all true. But the reality is he's so far away, it's not going to change in a year. And it's pretty apparent. So you might as well just do it. Justin, at the end of the day, we said it last week, but I'm going to say it again. This comes back to Robert Kraft. And this was a Kraft mistake. Jerod Mayo didn't do anything wrong. Robert Kraft has put this guy in a position that was just completely unfair.
He did. He put him in a position that was unfair.
And he was completely unready for.
He was completely unready for. And, part of it too, though, I agree. Kraft put him in a position that he wasn't ready for. But I also feel like Mayo has a certain hubris about him that, it almost feels like he was ready to accept something that maybe he wasn't ready for. You kind of got to put that on the person itself. I mean, there's a ton of people who would like to be head coaches in the NFL. I think part of having a successful transition to head coach and being a successful head coach is knowing yourself and knowing when the right opportunity for you is. And I think Mayo may have let his own ego got in the way and jumped the gun a little bit.
Yeah, agree. I think, sometimes I hear Mayo talk, Justin, and I'm like, I don't think he's very happy in this new job. Like, I think this has been overwhelming to him. I think he, despite the fact that he will deny this, and he has denied this in a few of his interviews, I think he's been a little blown back by just how heavy this whole thing is and how you can't say some of the things he said. And he kind of thought he was going to come in and change the culture and be charming at the mic, and it was just all going to go well. And he's getting burned by that on an almost week basis. He doesn't strike me as a guy that really is happy or enjoys what he's doing right now. I'll even say this. I wouldn't be surprised if he quit after 1 year.
Now that I think would surprise me a little bit, but I do agree. I think probably under the hood, there's some frustration there. And who knows, maybe there's even a little bit of internal doubt. I mean, have you ever in your life taken a job and then just been like, oh shit, this was a terrible mistake, and then you're out after 3, 6 months, a year, whatever? Yeah, I think growing up, I think most people go through that experience where you're like, whoa, all right, I'm a little bit over my head here. But you know what though, you have to have the humility to recognize that. And I still wonder if Gerard Mayo maybe lacks the humility in the accountability to kind of realize what's going on here and maybe recognize that he either wasn't ready or he's not the right guy for the job right now. I mean, I don't expect him to come out and say that, but I wonder if he has enough self-awareness that those thoughts are starting to creep into the back of his mind.
I was in a similar situation a couple of years ago where I jumped ship from Beth Israel to another hospital.
Yeah.
Actually, at the time I was at Stewart. I was happy at Stewart, and I jumped ship to another hospital. And after like 3 or 4 months, I was just like, whoa, this was a big, big mistake professionally. And I shocked them when I gave my resignation after 9 months. And I come back to Beth Israel, and I'm very happy now. But I'm just saying, like, professionals, sometimes you try your best to put yourself in a good situation, and it doesn't always work the way you planned. You get into the thing and you realize it wasn't what you wanted or expected. And I think that's where Mayo is right now. I really do.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think his team is almost like implicitly agreeing because they haven't done anything, I think, to move themselves in the right direction either.
Yep. Agreed. All right, Justin, let's shift gears a little bit. I think we can both agree there's a lot of uncertainty around Mayo. And like I said, I mean, if you're a Patriots fan and you're looking for something to watch in these last 4 games, Gerard Mayo's coaching for his job. I don't think that's being histrionic. I really don't. I think it's 100. I think the reporting from Giardi, Bedard, plugged in people, if that's trickling out to where we're hearing it, that's because there's a lot of internal stuff going on there. And this has been a disaster. So let's see what happens over these last 4 weeks and see if Mayo keeps his job. Let's talk about some of these offseason moves they made, Justin. Not really worked out, right? Do you want to go name by name? What do you think? They signed Mike Onwenu. I would say that was a fail. He's underperformed. Antonio Gibson's been okay. Austin Hooper, I think, has been a win. Chukwuka Okorafor has been a disaster. He's not with the team. Hunter Henry, that was a good signing. Kyle Douglas has been a disaster. Jabril Peppers missed half the year because he got arrested. Michael Jordan, Nick Leverett, disasters, right? Christian Barmore, extension through no fault of their own, blew up in their face. Looking at these moves, what a disaster this offseason was.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean,
how about Ramondre Stevenson? I didn't even mention that one. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't look like a lot of what they've honestly, other than, I think the easiest way to say it is like, other than Drake May, almost everything they've done, from the coaches to the draft to what they've done, just what they've done on the offseason, on and off the field, like, just seems like everything hasn't worked out. It's kind of crazy that Drake May seems to be the only thing that worked out for this team, just across the board.
Yes, agreed. And also, how about the draft? Besides Drake May, what player on this team has, been a successful draft pick? I mean, they're actually right now in danger of literally going 0 for the draft besides Drake May.
Yeah, exactly. And this is continuing a very troubling trend. We harped on Belichick in his draft woes, before he left. That was one of the first things I was hoping we'd see an improvement in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it didn't happen this year. It did not happen. Like, Jalen Polk is a disaster. Javon Baker is a disaster. They can't even get on the field. None of the linemen they drafted, I'm not totally closing the book on them, but none of them have proven that they're NFL players. And there doesn't seem like there's any sleeper from those later rounds. So it's just a total mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree.
All right. Let's shift gears. Let's go to around the league. Right now, I think we've talked enough about this debacle in New England, and you want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff going on?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we're going to do one episode this week because it's the bye week. It was a little less content, so we're just going to shift right to around the league for our listeners. Detroit and Buffalo, Justin. playing this week, probably the game of the year. Okay. And what it really got me thinking is these are two teams that are both such terrific stories. Detroit, Buffalo, extremely worthy franchises, worthy fan bases for a Super Bowl win, but they both can't win the Super Bowl, right? And if we're lucky, I think everyone's kind of rooting for, no one wants to see Kansas City again, right?
Right.
Whose fan base will be more devastated if they don't win the Super Bowl, Detroit or Buffalo?
Oh man, that's
someone's going to have their heart broken.
Someone will 100% have their heart broken. I'm going to say Detroit. I think they'll be a little bit more heartbroken just because I feel like the Buffalo fans are, in a weird way, have probably grown accustomed to it at this point. Like Detroit, I feel like there's a little bit more heartbreak on the line. Like they're America's team. They were so close last year. They've been, the best team in the NFL this year. They got the best record. I'm going to say Detroit's team would be a little bit more devastated.
You think so? Because think of the way Buffalo has lost. I mean, Buffalo has been knocking on the door for so many years and so close to getting to a Super Bowl. Think of some of those devastating postseason losses. We all thought the window was closed. Now they're right there again. If they don't make it, I mean, imagine being a Bills fan.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, but that's the thing though, is I think the Bills fans have to be one of the most resilient and I mean, Detroit's fan base is very resilient too, but the Bills, to keep losing the way they have year after year after year, the disappointment year after year after year, I almost feel like they're hardened vets at this point when it comes to disappointment in the playoffs. I don't know. I mean, both teams obviously, it would be great. I mean, in a year where the Patriots are totally out of it and we have nothing to lose with them, I gotta say, wouldn't that be the most exciting Super Bowl possible?
Oh my God!
A Bills Lions Super Bowl, going into that no matter what one organization and their fan base is going to be changed forever. Like history's in the making. It would just be such a cool storyline to follow.
It would be, Justin, but I think you would call that Super Bowl the Heartbreak Bowl.
Yeah,
because one of those
friggin'
groups is just going to get devastated.
Yeah. Exactly. I know someone's gonna at the end of the day, there's gonna be 31 teams that are disappointed with how the season ended, right? And you know what, if you're the Buffalo Bills or the Detroit Lions, I really do think no matter what, it's either win or it's a failure, right? Like none of them are settling for moral victories at this point. I don't think a Super Bowl loss versus a round one exit does anything for anybody. I think both teams have said it's win or bust.
Josh Allen is freaking amazing. Did you see the game on Sunday against the Rams? Like 6 touchdowns. I know your stance on the Bills. You won't believe it until they win in the postseason. Yeah. And I totally get it. And you're not wrong. But oh my God, like the brilliance of Josh Allen, that just has to be acknowledged. If there is any player in this league that deserves to win a Super Bowl, it's Josh Allen. I will go so far as to say this, and maybe this isn't as hot a take as I think it is because Mahomes is playing like trash lately. Josh Allen is the best player in the NFL right now, and he deserves to win a Super Bowl.
I'm not here to disagree with that, but my sentiment remains the same. I want to see him and his team do it in the playoffs. I want to see them. Look, if they hoist the trophy, I'll have no argument. I'll have nothing to say, right? And I will eat crow, and that is fine by me. And you know what? I'd actually be kind of happy for Josh Allen and the Buffalo fan base. But again, got to prove it to me. I'm just at that point with them.
And that was really the one of the, I think, the most relevant things that happened this weekend, Justin, was the Sunday night game and the Chiefs hanging on for that win, because it really lowered the chances that Buffalo could still get home field advantage. The combination of Buffalo losing and Kansas City eking out that win pretty much guarantees that barring something crazy, that the Chiefs are going to be get home field advantage in Arrowhead this fall, this winter.
Right. And now I'm trying to remember if the Chiefs were to fall another game, right? Like if these teams are to tie in the records, their records at the end of the year, they don't take into account head to head, right? They don't take into account that Buffalo beat them. It goes to divisional record.
If they have
right?
the same record, then Buffalo would have the advantage.
It doesn't go right to divisional record?
No, head to head count is the first tiebreaker.
Okay, all right. So really Buffalo's chasing one right now. They still got a really good chance. I find it very tough to believe Kansas City's not going to slip up one more time before the end of the year. They've just been it's just week after week they're eking out. I feel like they're going to get caught. They're going to get caught sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City doesn't look good. I've never in my entire football viewing career seen a team with a horseshoe up their backside as much as the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it's been week in, week out since week one. So the question becomes, does that work for them or against them? Like, do you hold it against them that they're playing down to the competition and they're getting super lucky at the end of these games? Or do you say that it is actually a tremendous reflection of their strength as a team, that they're still able to win, and that they're going to be a tremendously difficult out because they know how to win? Which way could you go? Do you go with that? You could argue either way.
I'll keep it very simple. I think it's both. I'm impressed with them as a team, and I think it's a reflection of how good that team is, how resilient they are, in their ability to battle and be the better team and find competitive edges. But I also think that the rate at which they're doing it, the clip at which things are turning out in their favor, is unsustainable. So I think it's a little bit of both.
I feel like a team that knows how to win, as much as I want to hold it against Kansas City, right? When you get in the postseason and all these games are competitive, Reed and Mahomes are going to just keep it close because they're Reed and Mahomes. And I'll tell you, man, if I'm a coach coaching against the Chiefs in the postseason, guess what? Sean McDermott, Jim Harbaugh, whatever, Mike Tomlin, go for the jugular. Go for it on 4th and 1. Go for 2. Take those chances, okay? Don't give Patrick Mahomes the ball back when the game is on the line, because he will burn you.
Yeah, no, he will. He will. I mean, look, Patrick Mahomes, again, you can get annoyed with him and you can get annoyed with how the Chiefs are winning. But at the end of the day, I think it just goes back to the fact that this guy's a winner. He's a winner. He finds ways to win games.
He's a winner.
He finds ways to make plays even when he's not having his best game. He comes up big in clutch moments. Like, he does enough, even if it's not always his best. The guy is just a flat out freaking winner. I'm sorry. There's really no other way around it.
And it's, I think if I'm Buffalo, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, whoever, to me, that's terrifying. Like, I don't want to face that Chiefs team. Obviously, you don't want to face an 11-1 team. And let's not forget, Justin, as we have this conversation, right? This is all going to be probably happening in Arrowhead Stadium.
Yeah, I know. Again, yeah, and very tough place to play. The Chiefs are obviously very comfortable being there, and teams on the road have a very tough time playing there. So look, I mean, we all want to talk about the flashy picks in the AFC. I mean, the Baltimores, the Buffaloes, the Houstons, the teams that are maybe more exciting to think about. But I'm sorry, the Chiefs have just as good a chance as anybody, arguably the best chance to wind up right back in the Super Bowl.
It's actually a really stacked AFC field this year, if you really think about it, right?
It is. It's a pretty good field, yeah.
It's probably as good a field as we've had in recent memory. You've got 5 or 6 legit teams. I'm sorry, that Chargers team with Harbaugh and the way they're playing, that's a legit playoff team. Yep. Denver with Sean Payton, the way Bo Nix is playing, that's your 7 seed. That team just almost beat Kansas City. Pittsburgh is going to be a tough out with that defense and the way Wilson's playing. Lamar Jackson's Lamar Jackson. The Texans had a down year, but I still think they're not a total slouch. with CJ Stroud. And then at the top, you have Buffalo and Kansas City. Like, good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously. It's a gauntlet of a year for the AFC. I think the one thing I'll say, and you know what, I think this has been kind of true, going back the last couple of years, is that whoever winds up making it out of the AFC, there's no way around it. They're going to have to go through a gauntlet, and they're going to have to really prove themselves to get there. And whoever wins the AFC and heads to the Super Bowl is going to be very well prepared to take on the challenger from the NFC.
But you know what's funny about that, Justin, is you can kind of say the same thing about the NFC this year. It's a top-heavy league.
It is very top-heavy.
And as the Patriots fans, we're on the opposite side of this because there's like 7 or 8 awful, awful, awful teams. Yes. And the Patriots, the Titans, the Jaguars, the Giants, the Raiders, the Browns, blah, blah, blah. There's also, conversely, like 8 or 9 really, more than that, really good teams in both conferences. Like both conferences have some really good teams. Like if you're Detroit, look at that playoff field. You've got a tough road to the Super Bowl. You've got 2 legitimate good teams in your division. And division games are funny in the playoffs. The Packers and the Vikings that could beat you. Philadelphia is red hot. Tampa Bay went toe-to-toe with Detroit in the postseason last year. I think they make it. The Rams might be the hottest team in the league, right? That's a legit NFC playoff field too.
Look, it's legit. I think if you compare the two, I think you got to say you probably got a better overall field in the AFC. But yeah, I think the NFC, like you said, it's top heavy. But some of those teams that are going to sneak into the playoffs are scrappy, and and we've seen it. We've seen it before that sometimes the teams that are, it's not necessarily where you finish in the standings. It's how you finish in terms of the quality of football you're playing towards the end of the year. We've seen tons of teams, get hot the last few weeks, back half of the year, kind of back their way into a wild card spot and find themselves in a Super Bowl. It really is about catching fire at the right time.
It is. And look in the NFC, like even in which I agree is the weaker of the 2 conferences. But it's top heavy in both teams. And like you look at the 7 seeds right now in both conferences, it's the Broncos in the AFC, the Commanders in the NFC. I could see either of those teams going in and upsetting a much higher seed in the first round. And I would even say that, Justin, about the 8 seed, the Rams, who are not in the playoffs if the season ended today. Yep. The way that team is playing, if they're healthy, I could totally see them beating the Eagles or the Seahawks or something like that.
Yes, totally agree.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the other side of the league. I want to talk a little bit about the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young, Justin. Bryce Young is playing much better. He's a guy who we thought his career was totally dead. Dead. Let's not overstate what Bryce Young has done the last few weeks, okay? He's showing that he's not a total disaster. He's not Trey Lance or Jamarcus Russell. They're not winning games. He's not throwing for 400 yards a game. He's showing he's a bottom tier NFL starter / high level backup. So I like the guy. I'm rooting for Bryce Young because I want to see him redeem his career at this point. But I think people are going a little overboard on what they're doing in Carolina. They have become respectable and nothing more.
Look, here's kind of my take on what I'm seeing out of Bryce Young in this Carolina team. Yes, Bryce Young, he's totally kind of flipped the switch the last couple of weeks. He's looked pretty competent. But here's what that tells me. I actually think it's a signifier of a problem. And look, in the couple of weeks that he was benched, okay, to when he started when he started again and, was kind of flipped that switch, he didn't magically become a better football player in those couple of weeks. I'm sorry. Like, you can't tell me that the guy became more talented mid-season in a couple of weeks. What I think happened is the pressure got taken off of him. He had hit his rock bottom. He was benched. He was playing about as bad as it could get. His expectations were as low as they had ever been. And he was literally at his rock bottom. And when all the pressure was taken off of him, all the expectations were taken off of him in this team, he was able to flip that switch. That tells me that he's got talent. He may be an athletic kid. He may be a decent quarterback, so to speak. He's got talent, but he does not have the mental attributes that a starting franchise quarterback needs in the NFL. Because to me, it comes all down to pressure and expectations. He did not magically figure out how to be an NFL quarterback or get infinitely more talented in a couple of weeks riding the bench.
Justin, I agree with that in terms of what you're saying. And it is a little bit of an indictment on him that this is what it took to get the best, or to get him to get better. But I would also push back a little when you say he's got talent. Like, does he really have talent? Because when I watch him play, I'm like, how the hell was this guy the number one pick in the draft? Like, he has a good arm, but okay arm, not a great one. He's small. He's mobility is okay, but it's not like he's like Kyler Murray or even Drake May back there. He can run if there's something wide open, but he's not Lamar Jackson. I don't even think he's all that talented.
Well, when I say talent, I mean that, like,
he's an NFL quarterback, so he's talented.
That's what I mean. What I mean is that he shouldn't be out of the league after this year. You know what I mean? There's a spot for him on a roster somewhere.
I agree with that. He's proving that.
Yes, that's what I mean when I say he has talent. It's not like the guy just can't play at all. But I agree. I think we're seeing that he has a very limited ceiling. He's probably going to wind up as a career bridge quarterback or career backup. I can't see him getting too many other opportunities to lead a franchise or be that guy. And you know what? I think that's rightfully so. I think he came into college a little overinflated, a little overhyped, and I think he's kind of settling, back where he belongs in reality. And maybe that's what he needed. Maybe Bryce Young was always destined to be a backup or, a bottom tier starter, and he just needed some of the expectations and pressure removed for him to settle into that role. And maybe that will be a good role for him.
I think that's where he's going to land. I want to be clear. Like, I'm rooting for Bryce Young. Like, I like rooting for the downtrodden asset.
Yeah.
And it's become a good story to kind of root for this guy.
Yeah.
But I think it's being a little overstated right now, what he's actually proven and what he's done the last few weeks. On the other side of that, Justin, the Eagles, I don't know. I don't hold it against them that they were able to play against a hot team, not play their best game, and still win. I always feel like that's a strength. A team that's a positive indicator for a team that you can come out and play a crap game and still come out on top at the end.
I don't disagree with that. I think that was more so, though, the Panthers losing it. Like, in all reality, the Eagles should have lost that game, right? Xavier Legette dropped that touchdown pass at the end of the game. I don't know if you saw that. I mean, that, 9 out of 10 receivers in the NFL make that catch 10 out of 10 times, so that was pretty bad. And obviously I think that's the reason why the Eagles wound up winning that game. One thing I'll say, going back to Bryce Young real quick too, is, we saw what happened when Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield and some of those guys had a stint in Carolina, right? And it made them look like they were, just absolutely abysmal. And now you see them leading franchise and having successful careers. So that too, I think is weighing into the Bryce Young situation. I think he's playing for a super dysfunctional franchise that lacks talent. But going back to the Eagles, look, I think this is a game that the Eagles should have lost. I think the fact that they got lucky and won, I think that maybe bodes well for their morale moving forward. The fact that, they escaped a close one and they don't have to deal with the reality of it. But let's make no mistake, like this Eagles team has flaws. And just based off of what we've seen from them the last 2 years and their ability to collapse, I never know when to feel good about this team. And I never know when to feel secure that they have, quote unquote, righted the ship.
I mean, it's easy for us to say in the first week of December that they're proving everyone wrong, right? But the kind of toxicity that they had on that Eagles team last year, I don't know if you just erase that with like one winning streak where, frankly, they really haven't been tested with too much in terms of like a super challenging opponent, right? And I still wonder if that toxicity is still lurking somewhere in that Eagles locker room. And when things start to go bad, right, in like a January playoff game, you get in a tough spot. Is AJ Brown going to be yelling at Jalen Hurts on the sideline? Is Jalen Hurts going to be yelling at Nick Sirianni on the sideline? Are guys going to be quitting on defense? Because that's what we saw last year with Philadelphia. So It's one of those things where they're hot and they look good, and I give them credit for winning that game on Sunday. But at the same time, I don't think that there's anything, anything. I don't think they're totally over what we saw last year either.
I totally agree. I mean, even you look at, they were able to squeak out a win where they shouldn't. And, you listen to AJ Brown's comments after the game, him directly calling out his quarterback, directly calling out, Jalen Hurts and the QB play. And this is not the first time that AJ Brown has done that. He has shown that he can clearly be toxic. For him, it's a me, not a we type of attitude and mentality that he brings to the team. And look, to your point, I think this team is one bad game away from that entire locker room imploding. Like Jalen Hurts is a ticking time bomb with Nick Sirianni. AJ Brown is a ticking time bomb with AJ Brown and Nick Sirianni. Like, there's just so much that can go wrong still for that team. And I do not see the fortitude and the resilience if they were to lose a bad game to band together and come back from it. I think they're riding the high of a win streak right now.
That's exactly what it is. And there are just some teams, Justin, that everything's fine as long as everything's going well.
Exactly.
And that's in all sports at every level.
Yes.
Right. But you get the wrong personalities in that locker room. And when things go wrong, some teams can't handle that. And I wonder if the Eagles are one of those teams.
100%. And look, there's talk about, the Eagles being one of the better teams in football, the Eagles, potentially being the new favorite to come out of the NFC. Eagles got a good chance to win the Super Bowl. Name me one team in recent memory that's been able to hoist the Lombardi trophy without being able to show resilience and fight through adversity in the playoffs. It doesn't happen. In this Eagles team, I think they're going to be in for a rude awakening when they get punched in the mouth again.
110% agree, Justin. 110% agree.
Yeah.
All right. And then two quick last observations, and we're going to wrap it up. Number one is, I got to say, I don't think the Dolphins are going to make the playoffs this year, but can we just make a quick note? Tua Tagovailoa, 15 touchdowns and 1 pick since he came back.
Yeah.
So that cat is balling out for a guy who we all thought was going to retire. And I do think at some point, look, sometimes I wonder how he does it because I don't think he's super talented.
Right.
But I mean, the guy does put results up, and it's not just that he has Hill and Waddle around him. I mean, that helps, and that I think gets the best out of him. But you look at how bad it was with those backups and just the contrast between him and anyone else that has played quarterback for that team in the last few years. And at some point, you have to give some credit to Tua. Begrudgingly fine, mysteriously fine, but he deserves a little credit.
I give him his credit. I think he's earned the right to call himself a franchise quarterback. I think he's earned that starting job in Miami. I think he should be. He should hold it for now, as long as he's healthy and as long as he wants it. That team, though, you talk about needs. I can't think of a team that has a more pressing matter to bring in a viable backup quarterback than the Miami Dolphins. I mean, if Tua has shown that I think he can play at the level where he should be part of your long-term plans, but by the same token, if that guy's part of your long-term plans, you need a backup plan and you need a good one. So I think that's a big priority for this team. But I got to say, he has been balling. The guy is showing that he's resilient as ever. He's still, scrambling and sliding. I mean, he's mixing it up on some of those, those QB scrambles. Like, the guy is not showing that he's shell shocked or timid or anything by any stretch of the imagination. He's going out there and he's playing his heart out.
He is. I mean, almost perhaps recklessly so.
Yes.
Right. Because I still, I wouldn't fault the guy tomorrow if he said, I'm retiring, I'm out. But I mean, look, I almost think with him, it's like, it's a young man's thing, right? Like, he has that young guy thing where he still thinks he can do anything. And I wonder if 10, 15, 20 years from now, he's going to regret what he's doing now. I give him credit for having the courage to get back on an NFL field, after everything he went through.
I do. I do. I give him a ton of credit. The guy is clearly gutsy. And you know what? I hope he stays healthy. I hope he continues to have success. I think the Dolphins are obviously, an interesting team when he's in the lineup. And he's got the weapons around him. So you know what? I hope he's able to stay in the field and put on a show. And I think it would be interesting if Miami backed their way into the playoffs. I don't see how they're going to do it unless one of these teams collapse, like the Broncos or the Chargers. I just don't see that happening though.
Justin, honestly, like I get what you're saying. Miami's not as bad as the record indicates. I think Denver is a much better team to watch in the postseason. Miami, the story with them. We've seen it the last 2 years. If they do sneak in, they'll be one and done. They'll get crushed, especially if they have to go up to cold weather.
Yeah.
They don't beat good teams. Denver has shown at least that they can hang in there with Kansas City, some other good teams. I would much rather watch Denver than Miami in that last playoff spot.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think Denver's better equipped right now to take on this playoff field for sure.
One last quick thought, buddy, and then we're gonna wrap it up. The Giants and the Raiders, if the season ended today, they will be the number 1 and number 2 pick in the draft. They may not be the 2 worst teams in the NFL, but do you agree with me? They're the 2 most hopeless teams in the NFL. And I think that as a fan, they are marquee franchises in a sense, the both of them. I want them to finish 1-2 because I want them to be able to draft quarterbacks and rebuild, because I think the league is better if both those teams are good. So I'm glad those 2 teams are right now 1 and 2, and I hope that keeps up. I don't want Jacksonville to get Shedeur Sanders or whoever it is. Like, that's just going to a wasteland. I want to see Shedeur Sanders in New York. I want to see him in Vegas. I want to see Travis Hunter in Vegas. That's what I'm hoping for.
I agree. I think the Giants and the Raiders are arguably, and probably, you can throw Carolina into that mix, the 2 and 3, most hopeless franchise in the NFL. But you just hit the nail on the head. The Giants and the Raiders, what they have going for them is their market, the ability to go play in New York, the ability to go play in Las Vegas. Like, those are markets that are enticing to people. So even though those franchises right now seem hopeless, they have, I think, just a natural leg up compared to some of the organizations out there when it comes to getting this rebuild, and getting themselves back on track. But you know what? I mean, you're already hearing rumbles now of certain guys coming out of college saying they don't want to go to certain places. And I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting.
It will be interesting to see if any of these young players are able to dictate their terms,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, what's his name? I think Coach.
It's happened in other sports.
It has. And I think Coach Prime came out the other day and said he doesn't want Shedeur going to the Giants, something like that. So
interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, you start to factor in, okay, these teams, even if they got the top 2 picks, like, are they going to get the guy they want? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
But if I'm Shedeur, I would love to go to the Giants. I think that would be a great, a match made in heaven. Put a player like that in the biggest media market in the world.
Yeah. So from what I've been hearing, Prime and Shedeur want to go to Vegas, and I've heard that the Giants are all in on Cam Ward, the guy from Miami. Obviously, both all just kind of speculation right now, but we'll see. It'll be interesting to follow.
It will be. Okay, brother, that is all the time we have. I'm going to say let's wrap this thing up. And anything else you want to add before we do so?
No, that's it. Just one last thing, I guess, to just throw a little bit of fantasy in there. Just congrats to anybody who's heading into playoffs this week. I know that was, last week 14 was the end of year for a lot of people. So good luck if you're heading into the playoffs.
Yes, absolutely. And I will say, Justin, that I got my number 1 seed and my bye week in my fantasy league, which I'm not sure has ever happened for me before. So I'm pumped about that.
Beautiful. Big advantage there.
Big advantage there. Get a free pass.
Exactly.
Strong with that. All right. Want to thank everyone that listened. Have a great week. We will catch you next week. We'll see what we didn't talk about the Patriots Cardinals. Do you want to just say anything about that?
Honestly,
I actually like the Patriots with 6 points this week.
Yeah, I don't mind the Patriots. I think look, the determining factor is this team coming back from their bye week this late in the season with very little to play for, and are we going to see a disciplined team that leaves it all out in the field? I think it's going to be an indictment of Gerard Mayo. I think it's going to be an indictment of the culture in this team and in the locker room. And I think it's going to be a big indication for a lot of the things that we were talking about, how the rest of this year plays out.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, man, that's all the time we have. I want to thank everyone that listened to this edition of the Ultimate Patriots Dr. Football Podcast. Have a great week, and we will catch you next week with another episode.